You also talk about Karl Marx in your book, and he's often portrayed, even in the media today, as kind of a controversial figure. But he's obviously very influential. So maybe tell me more about why you included Marx in your book, and maybe say why he's helped people today.
Well, Karl Marx is the father of Marxism, which is really the basis, the idea behind communism. So his influence through history was considerable. So Marx was a German economist who Germany had experienced the Industrial Revolution later than Britain, but when it came to Germany, Marx rejected how Adam Smith, the classical economist, saw the Industrial Revolution. He thought that it would generate exploitation, inequality, and people would want to have a more egalitarian society. So that thinking eventually, by the early part of the 20th century, led to about 60% of the world's population living in either socialist or communist regimes. And it really wasn't until the end of the Cold War, so the end of the 1980s, that it seemed that communism, at least, wasn't a model that was bringing about better living standards for people. So his ideas, just like a number of other ones that I have in there, so Friedrich Hayek, who was very free market, all the way on the other side of the spectrum, their influence through history was apparent, and some version of what it is that they were proposing or implementing or arguing for still persists to this day. The Chinese economy, second biggest in the world, is still run by a communist political system, which followed the Soviet system, which obviously followed the Marxist system in the 1950s at least. So you still see how the influence of those through history can be felt today. But there's also lessons in the book about what's worked and what hasn't. And the end of the Cold War told us that market-based economies bring about more prosperity than the system that Marx had advocated. But as a matter of being a significant figure in history, Karl Marx certainly was that.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess London was a very different place when Karl Marx was writing his book. It was in the 1860s. It was like where Charles Dickens was kind of writing, and the conditions of the time must have been pretty horrific. You think of Oliver Twist and Christmas Carol. So a very kind of different time. But that's interesting that you're saying his work has kind of led on to communism, etc. So that's interesting. So tell me more about so we talked maybe about the past, and we talk about the present. Where do you see kind of economists going in the future? Where do you see what kind of policies that we're thinking about that can actually, you mentioned inequality, which is obviously a massive topic at the moment. How can economists reduce inequality? Where do you see policymakers improving things for people today?
Well, I think one of the overriding lessons from the book is that economics has always been a battle of ideas. And the battles are more fierce when economic consensus breaks down. And we saw that through history. I mentioned the split between market economies and communist systems in the early part of the 20th century. And I think at present, we are also facing a breakdown in the economic consensus. There's a dissatisfaction with the way that the market economy has worked. People are looking for alternatives. And it's during these times where I think you can draw on the ideas and the evidence and the lessons from what's come before, and try and see if there's a way to forge a new consensus, to learn from the past and argue for the kind of economic system that would work for the 21st century, one that's more equitable, one that's more sustainable, one that has, in the very same way that we've seen this throughout history, the creation of the welfare state in the early 20th century. That's very different than what the capitalist system was in the 19th century. So all of these things, change comes about. And I think that's where the subject has always been subject to change, subject to a battle between economists in terms of ideas. And I think the current period is another time when people are looking for another system. And I think that's why it's even more important to learn from history, what's worked, what hasn't, and then develop your own ideas based on that as to the system that you like to, the economic system that you like to live in going forward.
Buy the book Millennial Money Mindset. If you want the fruits, you need the roots. It's the 5-step method to getting money mindset, getting more money into your pocket, more time in your day, and less stress in your life. Get your copy today. You can pick it up on Amazon in print, Kindle, or Audible version.
Money mindset.
I think that sounds alright.